This is a presentation I provided to BMW at their supplier diversity conference in April of 2013. Posting here on LinkedIn so that folks who wanted to have a copy of it could from that conference, as well as others that might be interested. The concept is brand looping, which is really looking at how to implement the role of brand in your organization. Whether you have a brand already or whether you want to develop and create one does not matter. I will say this is a brief overview. This is something that I normally spend a whole semester in a brand management class covering, but we will provide you a high-level overview in a small period of time. My name is Alan Dusterhouse, and I teach at the George Dean Johnson Jr. College of Business and Economics at the University of South Carolina upstate. And as I said, we're going to cover brand looping. We're going to look at a little bit of branding and why. Some people may still not understand the value that it has, and we'll look at that momentarily, and look at the history of branding in about a 3-minute video. And then we'll go through the 4 areas: assessment, auditing, array, and adjustment for using this notion of brand looping. You can essentially, after you've watched this presentation, listen to it, you can jump in at any point in there. What you will find is that once you jump in, you'll run through this cycle over and over again. And then we'll talk about brand mantra. When I did the presentation in April, this was really a takeaway for the group so that they had something they could use right away in their organization of value. And it's a fundamental piece of branding, and it'll be something that hopefully you will find useful as well. So why branding? Well, bottom line is you want your customer to not be afraid to buy your product because they're not quite sure what they're going to get. So in other words, you will reduce their risk for purchasing your product. And this is done typically through having a level of quality that matches the price that you are charging for your product or service. And typically there's a level of consistency so that people know what they're going to get, and so when they see your brand, they can have the notion of quality and consistency in their mind, and as a result be satisfied with what they're going to get. Typically a high quality brand will provide you with great pricing power that will allow for you to have a little larger profit margin than folks with a brand that is not as strong. And this is a nice video that was done by a university promoting their master's degree program in brand management and brand leadership, but does a nice job of looking at branding over the years. there is a nice way of understanding brands. One key piece to keep in mind there is that brands have moved from control at the organizational level to the consumer level. So you will create a brand, but your customers, your consumers, they're going to be the ones that will validate that brand. And if they don't agree with what you've put out there, they're going to let you know that. And typically you'll see that in declining sales. And of course, if they do validate it, you'll see that in increased sales. Either way, you have to adjust to what your consumers, your customers, think of your brand. So it's really a two-way street now, which is something that is a shift for a lot of companies who think that they're able to control what they're all about. Those days are going to be pretty much long gone for most companies. So as we start, if you don't have a brand and you're just figuring out that you need to have one, that's great. You'd want to start right here. You'd want to assess kind of where you are. What do you have? In terms of elements, do you have a name? Do you have a logo? What colors do you use? And what kind of meanings do they portray, and what kind of meanings do you want them to portray? Do you have a URL, a website address? And what is it? And does it work with the rest of your brand? How is that fed into your email addresses that you might use? Even the postal address is an opportunity to have it be a part of your brand as well. So all these different types of elements, if you don't have them, you may want to get many or most of them. And if you do have them, you may want to review whether you want to tweak them or keep them the way they are. Then you want to look at POP and POD. POP is points of parity, and this is where you are the same as your competition. So what are you offering as a product or service that is the same as your competition? You may have multiple competitors and have some things in common with one competitor and other things in common with another competitor, and that's okay. But you want to know where you stand, where you're the same, and this is because those are things that are not going to be a competitive advantage for you. They're just going to be a general way of doing business. The POD, the points of distinction, that's where you can find a competitive advantage. What is something that you do that your competitor doesn't do? And again, much like your points of parity, you may have a different list of distinctions for different competitors, and that's okay too. But wherever you can compete in a point of distinction across as many competitors as possible, that's going to allow for you to have a significant competitive advantage and enhanced brand. Core associations will deal with things if you're just starting up. What do you want people to think about your brand? When they hear your company's name or the brand that you're going to use, what do you want them to think? What kind of feelings do you want to evoke? If you already have a brand, you might be thinking about what your consumers think or what you think your brand conveys in terms of associations. Are you trusted? Are you dependable? Are you friendly? Are you casual? Really can run the gamut and depends upon what industry you're in and clearly what you think is of value for your company and its brand. Then moving across, we look to audit, and you want to take a look at what it is that you have done and see if it's really kind of working or not. And so you might take an internal inventory and work with your sales staff and other employees, and do they buy into the brand? If they don't believe in the brand in the way that you have it conceived, that's an issue, and you need to figure out which way you're going to go. Are you going to shift to what your employees think and take their ideas and incorporate them, or are you going to work to educate them as to why they need to think about it in the way that you believe it ought to be thought about? Exploratory would be looking at your consumer, your customer base, and what do they think about your brand, and understanding how they view it. And we shift over into array, and this is really going to be a function of understanding, in a sense like a constellation, where are you as a brand vis-a-vis your competition. And there's some great ways of doing this to understand where you fit. One is a mental map, and this is where you might look at attributes like price and quality, and you literally map them out. You draw, a nice X, make an axis, and have one line be price, low to high, have the other axis line be quality, low to high, and then you look at each quadrant and plot where you are. Are you high quality and high priced? Great, then you're in that quadrant. And then where are your competitors? And that's going to help you visually see where do you sit amongst your competitors, and are you happy with where you sit. If you end up being low quality and high price and everyone else is high quality, high price, you may feel a little left out and need to shift things around to get in with the competition. Or you may feel good that you're there and can do something with it. Then frame of reference, this is really seeing how your customers view your brand vis-a-vis the competition. How do they place you in the continuum? And you can use some of those same metrics as well, price and quality, but understanding it from your customer's point of view is going to give you a different viewpoint. And ideally, if it aligns, that's great. If it doesn't, then that gives you some things to think about, and that brings us to adjust, and you need to think about whether you need to shift what you're doing. And this is really a notion of positioning. If your customers view you as low quality but high priced, and you thought you were high quality and high priced, that's a mismatch. And either you have to do a better job of helping them understand and educating them about the high level of quality that you have in your product, or you need to potentially reevaluate your product quality and really see if it is at the quality level for the price that you're charging. And that brings you into pricing and value, and you want to make sure that you are providing the level of value that the customer is going to expect given the price that you're charging. And so this has a wide range available to you, because you can offer low quality and a low price, and people will be just as satisfied as if you had a high price and high quality. So you have to figure out what is going to be best for your product or service given your marketplace and what your company goals are. And as I said before, we're going to talk about brand mantra a little bit as a takeaway for you. And a brand mantra, some might equate it to a tagline. I think there's a bit of a difference. A brand mantra is really the essence of what you're about in hopefully a few short words, whereas a tagline might just be an ancillary notion of what your organization does. With a brand mantra, you want to look at, I have what I think is a nice easy formula for helping to create one, and having an emotional modifier, and then a descriptive modifier, and then what your brand function is. And we've got an example here of a company with what I would say is certainly one of the best brand mantras in the world.
We don't make sports cars. We don't make SUVs. We don't make hybrids. And we don't make luxury sedans. We only make one thing. The ultimate driving machine.
So I don't think it gets much better than that. You can, clearly see with the ultimate driving machine, they have, let me go back here, you can see the emotional is the ultimate, and then driving is the descriptive, and then the brand function is the machine. It works very well. It elicits and evokes emotion that is very positive for them, and allows for them to do a lot of different things underneath that brand mantra. So they can have a sports sedan, they can have a crossover SUV type vehicle, they can have a hybrid, and they all fit underneath that ultimate driving machine because they're looking at the experience that you're going to have as opposed to just the notion of getting from A to B because it's a car. So the exercise is, what is your brand mantra? And there's a document that will be provided on the LinkedIn site as well that is what I call the brand mantra sandbox, that has a box for your emotional descriptor and your emotional modifier, and then your descriptive modifier, and then the brand function. And then on the right hand side is a place for you to match up and try out different combinations of your brand mantra. When you're doing this, I encourage you to really set aside your preconceived notions of what are good words and bad words. I would generate as many as you can. Ideally, doing this in a group amongst your management team makes a lot of sense. And you really want to throw anything out there when you're generating the different modifiers so that it's a true brainstorming exercise. You don't want to start eliminating and judging off the bat because someone's crazy idea will spawn someone else's excellent idea. Hopefully the brand mantra is something that you can incorporate and use right away if you're just starting out, and that'll help you get off the ground running. And if you already have one, maybe it's an opportunity just to kind of test it and make sure that it's doing what you want it to do for you. I certainly encourage you to think about finding some sort of emotional hook in your brand mantra, because that emotional hook is going to help you get a better relationship with your customer regardless of what your product or service is. And then keeping it as short as possible. If you can make it 3 words, I think that's going to be the way to go. If you end up feeling you need a whole sentence, so be it, but shorter is typically better. It's easier for people to remember, and that's really what you want people to do. I hope that you have found this of value, and just hop in the circle anywhere in terms of improving your brand and continue to loop around. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to send me a message via LinkedIn, and I wish you the best in your business.